ask was about, we were talking about the greenhouses, and I meant to ask you, when you built the greenhouse in Beverly Glen, how did you know what to do with your 2x4s and whatever you were doing? How did you know?
The way I do everything, I just sort of looked around to see what was around and designed something that looked like it.
Okay. And did it have any sort of heating or air conditioning or anything, or is it just a
It
glass
had
house?
heating and a vent.
An event, okay. And did you whitewash the glass?
Yes.
Okay. And then when you moved to Hollywood, you said you had a greenhouse built there. Is that right?
Yes.
And how did you find someone to build it for you?
Well, there was a company. I think they might still be around now, actually.
Okay.
It's called Southern California Greenhouse Company.
Okay. And how big of a greenhouse did they build for you?
Well, I think it was 2 8x12s put together.
Okay. And how did that compare to the one you had in Beverly Glen?
About 3 times as big.
Okay. So you had room for a lot of new plants. Okay. And when you moved to Hollywood, did you change what you were doing with the plants? Did you pick different plants, or were you kind of continuing along the same lines?
Well, I was continuing along, just kept getting new stud plants.
Still mostly callias?
Yeah, practically all callias.
Okay. And, okay, when you moved to San Pedro, how did you get the orchids moved from Hollywood to San Pedro?
I don't remember. Must have been quite a project.
I'll have to ask Mom about that and see what happened. And the other thing, I have some recollection that when we moved to San Pedro, and you moved the plants there, the greenhouses weren't, or the first greenhouse wasn't there yet.
No.
Okay, so where were the plants?
Out in the backyard.
And I sort of remember that. Did you lose a lot of them, or?
Sure.
Oh, that's too bad. Okay, so did the same company that built your greenhouse in Hollywood build the one in San Pedro?
Yeah.
Okay. And the first one was a glass, the first one you had there was glass, right? And how did that size compare to the one you had in Hollywood?
Well, that was a lot bigger. That was like maybe 18x36.
Okay. And that one had air conditioning and heating.
Yes.
Fans. Okay, did you have like misters or something for humidity control?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I remember the air conditioning breaking down on a regular basis.
Yeah.
In the middle of the summer, on the hottest day of summer.
Yeah, remember everything got burned up one time.
Yeah, that was bad. I remember that. Okay. And do you remember about what year you built the second greenhouse?
No.
Okay. But that one was plastic, right? It wasn't glass.
Yeah, we built that. My staff and I built.
Oh, really? I didn't realize that. Who was your staff then?
People from the Reh.
Oh, like Terry, Michael McIsaac maybe, or Gary. Okay. I didn't realize that. Okay, and so you guys used corrugated plastic sheets for the sides?
Yeah.
And so then you didn't have to whitewash them because they were...
Well, you did a little bit.
Okay. That's interesting. And did you have a design, or you just sort of, again...
No, sure, yeah.
No, but I mean, did you buy it as a pre-made design, or did you you guys came up with your own design?
Yeah.
Okay.
We knew how much space we had, and we built it to fill the space.
Okay. And then you must have hired someone else then to come in and put in the plumbing and the air conditioning and all that?
I don't remember. I guess so.
Yeah, because I don't think that those people would have known how to do that. Most
They
people
were pretty handy guys.
Well, maybe they did. Okay.
You remember Terry used to take care of all the machinery at the Reh.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Okay, I have a list of what I think are sort of the main things that you need to consider for growing orchids. And I'll kind of name them off, and if you could tell me a little bit about each one.
It depends on the orchids you're growing, remember that too.
Okay, the first one is water. how do you decide how often to water? And
Well, the best thing to do is look at your plant.
and what are you looking for?
Well, if it starts to look a little shriveled up, and it's not getting, it doesn't have enough water for it. But that can be one of two reasons.
Okay, what would they be?
Well, either that you're not watering it enough, or that you kill the roots
By rotting or
by overwatering.
overwatering? Right. Okay. And then, just on average, how often, like Callias, how often do they typically need watering?
Well, I look at the weather,
Okay.
and then I look at the plants and see how dry they.
Uh-huh.
You know, I'll stick my finger in the pot and look down underneath and see if there's any.
But you used to have people who came and watered every weekend, didn't you?
Yeah.
So that was sort of a regular thing.
Well, we had to do it that way.
Yeah, because you had to schedule it. Right. Okay. And that was all watering with a hose, though, right? You didn't have any overhead or any sort of irrigation system.
No.
Okay. I know different orchids need different temperature conditions. Which ones prefer the cooler temperature?
Well, there's thousands.
Well, generas, I mean.
Well, cymbidiums are mostly cooler, although there are some very warm cymbidiums too.
Okay.
And same thing with odonts. They're mostly cooler, but there are some very warm.
Okay. Phalaenopsis, what do they like?
Mostly hot.
Okay.
They're the warmest.
Okay. And Cattleyas?
Well, they're cool to intermediate to warm.
Okay. So more in the mid-range.
Yeah.
Okay. Oncidiums?
Same thing.
Miltonias?
Miltonias, well, there's two kinds. There's Miltoniopsis,
Mm-hmm.
and they have a really small range.
Okay.
I mean, they like the cool range around 50 to 55,
That is cool.
and the warm range up to 70.
Right. Okay.
So that's their ideal range.
Okay.
It doesn't mean they die.
Yeah.
It just means they don't
Just
grow
means they
as
do the
well.
best, right? Okay.
Now the other kind is Brazilian Miltonias, which are the real ones. And they have a much wider range that they can take.
What makes Miltoniopsis not the real Miltonias?
Well, they're just quite different structurally.
Okay. But why are they still called Miltoniopsis then? Because they're related?
Well, because all those things are related, but I mean, they put a lot of stuff originally in areas where it didn't belong. You know, well, this looks like that, you know, and that's the way they put it
In terms of where they named them, okay.
when they originally were
Naming.
naming everything and
Okay.
classifying it.
Got it. Okay. Okay, humidity. Which genera prefer more humidity?
Most of them prefer good humidity.
Because they're typically from the rainforest originally.
Well, no. There are, but that's, yes, in a way that's true. Rainforest or cool, humid.
Right.
You know, like there's lots of Native American orchids there.
I didn't know that.
Oh, a lot of them.
Mm.
And they're mostly cold weather things.
Okay.
And, you know, they lose all their leaves and everything in the winter. You don't even know they're there.
Oh, really? Oh. Like what? What would be one of those?
Cypripediums. There's a bunch of really pretty cypripediums.
Since Cypripedium, what you
That's
Papio
Paph.
petal.
Papio
Right.
petal.
Okay. Right. Like the lady slipper is the classic American one.
Yeah.
Okay. But Cattleya is like a lot of humidity.
Well, mostly, but there are some that can do without. You know, like it's a Rhyncholelia digbyana, which is part of the Cattleya family, and that lives in the desert.
So it must be a real challenge then in your greenhouse to have the right conditions for all the orchids.
It's impossible.
Yeah, so I know you put, like the ones in the way your greenhouse is now, you put ones that want a cooler conditions on one end and the warmer on the other, and then what you have a fan that opens and closes to sort of control. How do you control that it's cooler on one end of the greenhouse than the other?
Well, the cooler is at one end, and it comes blowing out of there. It's pretty cold.
So it just ends up being cooler on that end.
Yeah, and the heater's at the other end.
Oh, okay, well, that makes sense. Yeah.
But that didn't work as well, the heater at the other end, because I tried to make it hotter right there at that end, and I blew it down, and it nearly killed all the plants.
Right, because they can't have it really hot.
They can't have hot air blowing on.
Right.
It takes all the moisture out of them.
Right. Use your heater high up or low down?
High up.
Really, and even then it still did it.
Yeah.
Really? Okay. Interesting. I guess another way to do that then would have been like baseboard heating on that end. You know how they put hot water through it. You could have done it around.
Well, that's the best kind of heating of all.
Right, because it's
most
humid.
expensive.
Right, but it's humid then, and it doesn't dry them out.
Right.
Okay. Okay, light. What's the ideal light for, say, Cattleyas?
Well, they all have different lights. I mean, each species.
Uh-huh. But basically, none of them want direct sunlight for the most part, right?
Oh, yeah, a lot of them do.
Oh, really?
Sure.
Okay. So,
But I would say more don't than do.
so the greenhouse basically having either plastic or whitewashed glass is a compromise to not fry them, but give them and it's a lot of light, but not direct for the most part.
Yes.
So it's a compromise.
Well, my greenhouse has a curtain inside it, if you recall.
Yeah.
And that cuts down, and then there's whitewash on the outside.
Right. So you're basically giving them filtered light as a compromise.
Yes, right.
Okay. Okay, we talked a little bit about growing medium last time, fir bark, and I assume that you want to use the fir bark because it keeps the roots aerated.
Well, it's easy to work with,
Yeah.
and it comes in different sizes, so you can
Smaller plants.
Yeah, right.
Uh-huh.
And it's easily obtainable and
Yeah.
not too expensive.
Yeah.
You know, orchids will grow in anything.
Well, but aren't there? I mean, most orchids have roots that grow in the air, right? So
Well, they grow
they grow like on a tree or something.
down the tree trunk. But
Right.
It's not all in there. Half of it's in there.
Okay. But
See, one side is against the tree trunk.
right. But it's still part of it is in the air. It's never completely submerged like plants that you grow on the ground.
Well, there are orchids that grow in the ground.
Oh, really?
Lots of
Like what kinds?
terrestrial orchids, a lot of
I was
cypripediums,
gonna say like the paths, sure.
and even cymbidiums.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that. But Cattleyas mostly grow on the side of a tree.
Oh,
Oh, okay. How about Miltonias?
they're all
Okay.
epiphytic.
And Don's?
Epiphytic.
Okay. Okay. See, I always thought the reason you used the fir bark was to keep the roots aerated. So that's part of it. but
Oh,
not
that's
all
part of it. Yeah, yeah. You can't put it. You try and put them in dirt. That's,
Yeah, they'll rot, right? The
well,
roots
so
will
what
rot.
you do if you want to use dirt, you just use a little tiny bit.
Okay.
Actually, they can. In Hawaii, they grow them without anything.
Because the air is so humid and
Yeah. You can just put it in a pot
that's amazing.
and water and fertilize the pot, and the plant grows.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay. Okay.
They do a lot of that in Thailand too.
Is it humid there as well? Same conditions.
It's much more humid.
Oh, really?
You haven't lived until you've been in
Okay.
that area.
Maybe I could miss that. Although I like it in Hawaii, it's kind of soothing. It's kind of, you feel like you're being,
Oh, that's pleasant.
yeah, I like it's like being warmly bathed all the time.
But in there, you can't. You try and go out in the sun at midday.
Yeah,
After 5 minutes, you're soaking wet.
right. Between the heat and the humidity.
Yeah.
Okay, pot size. I assume the smaller the orchid, the smaller the pot.
Yeah.
And you mentioned, I think, when you first plant them out of the flask, you put them in, would you say 2 1/4 or 3 1/4?
3 1/4 inch community pots.
Community pots, okay, and then when
That means that they've got at least 25 plants in
okay, and then when they're ready to leave a community pot, what do you put them in?
individual
At
pots.
3 1/4 again,
Oh no, little tiny ones.
like 3, 2, what?
1 3/4, 2 inch pots.
Okay. Those little square plastic pots, they're not the terracotta. They don't come that small. Terracotta.
Yeah, they do.
Okay. Actually, you use mostly plastic pots anyway, don't you?
Yes, they're lighter, cheaper.
Plus, you can make the holes in the bottom if you want.
Yeah.
Okay, for drainage. Okay. Okay, you're doing all right.
Yeah, I'm doing fine.
And then, okay, so then you start with the little tiny 1 3/4 inch pots, and then then you just sort of, each time they need repotting, they go in a size up.
Well, not necessarily. You know, a lot of them need repotting, but they don't.
They're not growing that much.
Yeah.
Okay. Why would they need repotting then?
Well, the mix that you've got them in, the bark gets full of salt and stuff.
Oh, okay. So you're just giving them a clean, a new
Yeah.
Right. Environment. Okay. Okay, so the reasons then why you would repot would be either because the mix in general is getting tired, or it's too big for the pot. It needs to be in a bigger pot.
Yes.
Any other reason?
Well, there's some like, Toniopsis like to be done every year.
Oh, really?
I've been trying to get them all done every other year,
It's a pain in the neck. You have a lot of plants.
but they grow like weeds if you do that.
No, they just keep getting bigger and bigger.
Huge.
Do they get more and more flowers too then?
Yeah.
That sounds neat. Okay.
Yeah, I had one in bloom last winter, early winter. It had almost 100 flowers on it.
Wow, that must have been
Big
impressive.
ones.
Wow, that must have been really impressive.
It was.
Okay,
Go ahead.
she may not be able to hear what we're saying.
You'll hear it.
Okay, the next thing on my list is pests. I know you have, what do you call them, scale?
I've got a lot of it right
Okay, so
now.
scale, or you said they're little animals?
Yes.
Okay, and they get on it and they basically suck the life out of them?
Yeah, they make themselves into part of the plant almost.
Jeez.
You know, they're like ticks. You know how ticks affix themselves
Right,
to
they
you?
just suck up the
Yeah.
nutrients from liquid. Okay. So then what kind of stuff do you spray to get rid of scale?
Well, there's a whole bunch of stuff. It's less and less stuff that you could use, I can tell you.
Because of the laws or
Yeah.
outline of them.
Right.
What's your favorite one that you like to use?
I don't have any. I just hire the guy to do it.
Oh, okay, and then he uses whatever is the current
It's better to keep changing anyway because they build up an immunity.
tolerance. Sure. Yeah. Okay, aphids, are they a problem in the greenhouse?
Yes.
Okay. And
Not major. I mean, it's easier to get rid of them.
how do you get rid of them?
Spray.
Same
Go on,
chemicals that you use for the
Anything will get that.
Yeah, they're growth sensitive. Okay. Rodents, they come in to eat
Rats, I've got a lot of rats.
Okay, and they eat the roots, they eat the plants.
They eat the plants, knock the plants off the table, eat all the pollen. They love pollen.
That's interesting.
Well, it's pollen is
It's protein. I guess.
protein, yeah.
Did the frogs bother anything?
Yeah, I have a few frogs. I like them.
But they don't bother the plants?
No.
Okay. Any other pests in there that
Occasionally
bother
I'll have a lizard.
But the lizards don't bother them either, right?
They're great. They eat the insects.
Right. Okay. Any other pests? Anything else you have to spray for?
Well, there's mealybug. That's another bad bug.
Oh, okay.
It's easy to get. It's almost as sensitive as. It's not quite as easy as aphids, but almost. But it gets underneath everything, and if you don't get underneath and get it, it comes right back
Yeah, 'cause
and
they
instantly.
reproduce really fast.
Yeah.
Molds, bacteria, things like that.
Those are not, well, bacteria is, black rot is a serious problem.
And what do you do if that happens?
Not much.
So you basically try to avoid it.
You try and keep everything as
Not
neat and
Okay, get rid of
clean and
dead vegetation you want to get rid of.
yeah, give it enough air.
Uh-huh. Circulation.
Yeah, air circulation is really important. That's what's
Okay.
the biggest problem in my greenhouse now because I have too many plants.
Oh, they're not getting enough circulation around each plant. Right. Okay, well, that's all really interesting. Okay, what year did you moved to San Pedro in December of '63? And what was the last year you were there before you moved to Carpinteria? What year did you move to Carpinteria?
I think 85.
Okay, I'll confirm that with Mom. And did you continue to focus on?
We're on our 17th year now. We just started.
It's amazing. Okay, so you continue to focus on Cattleyas in San Pedro?
Well, I started focusing on other things then because that's when I became a judge.
Okay, and what made you
Before
decide?
that, I wasn't a judge.
Okay, what made you decide to become a judge?
Mostly Ernest Hetherington.
Okay, and how did he?
Well, he just thought I should be a judge. He thought I knew a lot about orchids. They needed a good judge.
Uh-huh.
So he sort of put me on the fast track, and I got through it
Okay,
a lot quicker than normal.
because you already knew a lot.
But then I got to a certain point, and then I hit a wall because they all thought I didn't know anything about anything else.
Or it's judging by species, so like you'd be only a judge for Cattleyas or only
No.
a judge? It's everything.
Everything. You have to judge everything.
Oh, okay. What did they think you didn't know at that point?
They thought I just knew Cattleya.
Oh, okay.
So at that point, I got rejected, actually. You know, you get for a promotion.
Oh, okay. What are the different levels of being a judge?
Well, you start out as a clerk.
Just taking down records for other people who are judging.
Yeah. And then you do a student judge, and then probationary judge, and then full judge.
Okay, and at what point did they knock you?
Between probationary and full.
They thought you didn't know enough about genera other than Cattleya.
And that's when I started growing all the other things.
Oh, so you make sure you knew about everything else.
Yeah, I thought, well, I'll find the best way to find out about all this stuff is grow it.
Sure. So what new things did you start growing?
Well, that's when I started growing Oncidium in general.
Okay.
Odonts and Oncidium,
Miltonians?
Miltonia.
Okay.
Miltonias I didn't really get big on until I got up to carp.
Okay.
Because they don't do as well in LA, it's warmer.
Too hot. Yeah. Yeah, Carpinteria is probably ideal. 'Cause it's,
Perfect.
yeah, it's a really temperate, really moderate.
Yeah.
So what are the good things and the bad things about being a judge?
Well, the good things are if you love flowers, it's a way you can.
Reward good ones?
Well, if you love flowers, it's a way of being with them.
Right. You get
And
to
looking
see all
at
the
it.
new good ones all the time.
Yeah, right.
Sure.
Of course, the bad thing is it's a judgment thing.
Right. People might not agree with your judgment.
Well, right, and it's just like skating.
Mm-hmm.
You have all the same problems exactly.
Politics, and
Everything.
everybody getting upset about things they don't like.
Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. So then finally, when you started growing all the other ones, they finally promoted you to full judge
Yeah.
because they decided you knew more. Okay, what, I was trying to remember that green flower that we were talking about. Pennsylvania Dutch, is that?
Pennsylvania Spring.
Spring, that's the one I was thinking of that Mom did a painting of.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was my first really giant success in greens.
Oh, really? It's a cross that you made, I assume.
Yeah, it's a cross I made, and I got awarded all over the country.
Oh, yeah, it's a beautiful flower.
Stuart sold it.
Okay. Okay, and about what year was that, probably? Well, we'll find out when they send us a list of awards from the
Yeah,
AOS.
you know it'll be in years.
Yeah, well, I think the AOS, they're going to send us that list, so we'll find out then. Okay, besides that, what are the most memorable crosses that you can think of that you did when you were in San Pedro?
Well, there's one SLC Luella.
And that's a purple.
No, it's a red.
It's a red, okay.
Just Luella, not Luella Red.
Okay, and what does that look like?
It's a big round red. It was the best. It's still a good red today.
About how many inches across?
3.5.
Okay, so reds are still, they're small. When you say big, that's big for a red, but not for a purple.
Right.
Okay, and it's all red, the whole thing is red, there's no other color on it?
Yeah, well, it opens sort of a lavender red, and it turns to an orange red.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting.
Okay.
And I had it I made the cross when I first moved down to Pedro.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I may have made the cross in Hollywood,
Okay.
but
It didn't bloom until
it bloomed when I was in Pedro.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, Armacost and Royston was selling my stuff.
Okay.
And they only would grow like 2 flasks of each thing. So there was only a few of these. But there's one that I got, and I showed it about 4 times, and every time there was something wrong with it.
Either it didn't open right or...
It had a little flower break, with a color break, where there's something that's not the same color on it.
Right.
Or it had one petal was twisted a little bit or something. And so I didn't get it awarded until about 10 years ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I had it for 20 years before
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so other memorable crosses from the San Pedro period?
Well, it was Luella Rehfield. That was a
The
big,
purple.
big, really dark purple.
Okay. Purple all over.
Yeah. And then there was BLC Palos Verdes with a real great green.
How was that different from Pennsylvania Spring?
Had a lot more flowers on it.
Okay.
Not quite as big.
Okay.
And then there was another one I made, something Birch Meadows. What was the cross?
It's okay, we can look it up.
Well, it was another green that I made that was a big success.
Okay.
It was named like Pennsylvania Spring, but it was something else.
What made you decide on the name Pennsylvania Spring?
I didn't. Ernie named this.
Oh, okay.
I just let Ernie name it.
Okay. So how did you go from Armacost and Royston to Stewart's?
Well, I made too many crosses for Armacost, and they weren't putting out enough plants.
Okay.
And Stewart said, well, he'd take everything.
Makes sense.
But he tried to steer me into making big crosses.
Was that bad?
No, that was good. Ernest was the top authority around, except for B.O. Bracy. I studied with him, too. Those 2 guys were the big influences at my breeding. And I used to go, Bracy, I would spend 2 days a year. I'd just go over and spend the whole day with him. And he would let me do it. It was really nice.
Just go through the greenhouse and talk about things.
Whatever he was doing all day, I would do it with him.
That sounds neat.
Yeah.
Good.
And then Ernest, I used to see him 4 or 5 times a year, and we'd have lunch and talk. Plus, I'd see him as a judging too.
Right.
So
Yeah.
those guys were about as good advice as you could get.
Right. See. Did you make any crosses during that period that you thought were really good that didn't get awarded? That still haven't gotten awarded?
Yeah, Luella Rehfield.
That hasn't gotten awarded?
Never had.
Really? Huh. Okay. Keep trying.
I only have 2 left now, I think.
Are there anyone else have them, or that's it?
That's it.
Can you clone them? to make more?
I could, but I'm not going to.
Why?
Well, that takes a long time.
How do you do that if you want to clone it? How do you do it?
Well, you have to get a growth that sometimes kills the plant because you get the front growth.
Yeah.
And it's about this big.
Yeah.
And you cut it off.
Yeah.
And then you cut it down until the very middle part is what's called the meristem.
Okay.
That's just a little tiny, tiny piece. But that's, you cut off all the germs and stuff.
Okay. And then?
And you put it in a bottle.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes there's different ways to get it started after that. There's one way that they shake it, and it gets them to start. Instead of making one plant, it'll make what we call a callus. It just keeps.
That's great. That's first thing. Okay, let's meristem. You were figuring out how to
Well, so
shake them
then
up.
they shake it and put it in a certain solution that makes it make new cells,
Okay.
but not differentiate into leaves and stuff.
Okay. And then
So those are like this, the cells that they've been experimenting with.
embryonic stem cells.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And so then they take those and spread them out. They'll cut them up and spread them on in a flask, and each one will make each little piece will
Make a
make
new
a plant.
Oh, wow. But if it doesn't work, you've lost your original
You've
plant.
lost your original plant. And number two, it takes years. I mean, by the time you do that. After 2 years, you can plant it in a little pot, a community pot.
Sure.
Then it's 7 more years after that for that particular cross to bloom.
Okay, so it takes forever, 10 years.
Yeah.
One more question. Oh, trips and shows that were really memorable to you from that period, St. Peter period?
Oh, there's lots of them. I guess the most memorable show was when we had the World Orchid Conference here in Long Beach. That was exciting.
Yeah.
They had it out in the harbor.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was on all these little boats.
That sounds neat.
Yeah, it was wild.
Did you do many orchid trips during that period, or was that really after you moved to Carpinteria that you started doing the trips?
No, I did some trips in that period. I'm trying to think if I was there when I don't remember.
I'll have to look back.
My dates are very hazy.
Yeah. Well, they would have probably been mostly national things, right? I don't think you did a lot of international orchid travel then.
Well, I started doing the national stuff when I moved to Carr.
Oh, okay.
That's when I retired. I had time.
Exactly. Yeah. We can look some stuff up. We'll see if we can figure out anything else regarding anything we talked about today that you can think of to add.
Well, just the thing that I thought was a great thing was starting to grow and breed orchids in 1950 gave me I was doing it through the golden years.
Yeah, at the very beginning, when things were really getting going.
Everything was really exciting. It was just like the skating.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that is neat. So you got to be on the ground floor of a lot of stuff. Neat. Okay. Anything else?
Great place for friends.
Yeah, you've made a lot of good friends. Is that because the people who like plants are usually pretty nice people, pretty smart?
Both?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay.
for the moment.
Okay.